Chapter 9. Chained Faith. Virnorin and Ivizatanit, having flown to Kinnante, discovered a whole army of lilacs. The pile of debris from the collapsed tower had already been cleared up, the bodies of the offenders had been removed, and the survivors had disappeared. The bodies of the 3 Earthlings lay in the cemetery inside a gazebo of red stone. Tevisa and Tor never broke their embrace. Their surviving faces retained the reflection of the dying impulse of boundless tenderness. Genital could only be recognized by his spacesuit. Eviza and Vir freed them from their protective clothing, which the researchers never had to take off, and proceeded to the burial ceremony. The strongest discharge from the SDP, and only the contours of bodies, indicated by a layer of thin ash, remained on the stone slab. In silent sorrow, Eviza and Vir collected and mixed the ashes. The dead Earthlings merged in a final brotherhood. A platinum urn and 3 SDPs, with traces of unsuccessful burglary attempts on the caps, were taken back to the Dark Flame. Rodis received an invitation from the Council of the Four. The rulers of the planet expressed their condolences to her on the death of the 3 guests from Earth. By chance or deliberately, the council met in a black room, named by the Earthlings the Hall of Darkness. Rodis, impassive and motionless, stood listening to Choyo Chagas' short speech. The chairman of the Council of the Four was obviously counting on a response, but Rodis remained silent. No one dared to break the uneasy quiet. Finally, Fay Rodis approached Choyo Chagas. "I have learned a lot on your planet," she said without affection, "and now I understand how a person can lie, having been forced to do so by a threatening situation." "But why does he lie? The one who is endowed with the might of great power, the strength given to him by the whole pyramid of the mankind of Yanyak, on top of which he stands. Why is this? Or is the whole system of your life so riddled with lies that even the rulers abide within its power?" Choyo Chagas stood up, turning pale, and stretching out tightly compressed lips, hissed, "What? How dare ye? Guided by worthy intentions, I dare everything. Ye assured me that the planes had been dispatched and reminded me that your orders were being followed unswervingly. On the second call, ye replied that the planes had been delayed by a storm through which they were breaking. Ignorance of the planetography of Yanyak compelled me to believe, but General Atal and Torlik examined the atmosphere, unraveled the deception, and managed before their death to warn us." Rodis fell silent. Choyo Chagas, face contorted. He shouted in falsetto to the whole room, "General Shi, yes, great chairman. Find out who flew the planes, who reported the storm, and who commanded the operation. Everyone here, I'll investigate myself. I implore ye, chairman of the council." Fay Rodis folded her hands and bowed her head. "No more victims. There are so many of them already. Your guards killed many people in the city of Kinnante, and we," Rodis wavered for the first time, "have lost our close ones." "Ye don't understand," retorted Choyo Chagas with anger. "Those who are to blame have dishonored me. The council, all of us, are presented as liars and hypocrites. What will change if they are executed? Everything. Violators of the order will suffer punishment. You will be convinced of the truthfulness of our intentions and the veracity of our faith." Fay Rodis looked meditatively at Chagas. The silent reproach of Fay Rodis became unbearable for the Lord of Tormance. He sank into his chair, bent awkwardly, and with a wave of his hand dismissed the council. Fay Rodis climbed the stairs to the earthly wing of the palace, preparing for a difficult conversation with Griff Rift. The commander had insisted on talking together. Rodis understood that this request had been caused only by the desire to concentrate all his will on her alone. They found themselves face to face, as if Rodis had entered and sat down in the cockpit between the wall and the console. The invisible boundary of contact of the frontal sides of the stereo projections contained in itself all the distance separating them. Rift and Rodis, like all Earthlings with a developed and trained psyche, understood each other almost without words. Words served only as confirmation of feelings. And, meeting the gaze of Griff Rift, who with reproof was contemplating the signals of life, the green lights, of which only 4 remained, Fay Rodis said firmly, "It's impossible, Rift. Escape, retreat, call it what ye will, is impossible. Impossible after we have sown hope, after this hope has begun to grow into faith." The starship commander heavily rose. Clutching his big hands, slightly hunching, he never stopped looking into the green eyes of a woman who one could not but love. Then he straightened up, straightened his chest. His whole being expressed perturbation. This confounded planet is not worth 1,000th of our losses. They are not ready for anything good here yet. We cannot allow such sacrifices. Rift pointed with his hand in the direction of the forever extinguished signals of life. Rodis approached the very border that separated their projections. "Calm down, Griff," she said softly and quietly, lifting her sad face to him. "Both of us, initiated into knowledge about which there is no concept here, cannot live and be free while there are unhappy people. How to cross the threshold of the highest joy when there is an entire planet in inferno, swamped in a sea of grief, which is against my life, yours, and all of ours? Ask my 3 companions. I know what they will say." Griff Rift replied, mastering himself, looking past Rodis. "They will say that their very presence is necessary, that it gives the people of Tormance a dream and faith, and thus unites in striving for a goal. So ye have answered, Rift. Ye know the longer we are here, the better for them. For all our imperfection, for them we are the living embodiment of everything that is brought to man by a communist society. If we run away, then the deaths of Tevisa, Tor, and General really will have been in vain. But if here there forms a group of people with knowledge, strength, and faith, then our mission is justified, even if we all perish. The legend of the 7 righteous ones. But the whole planet is not a town, and of us there are too few." The commander of the starship grinned with gloom. "And again ye forget that Earth is with us, her knowledge, her image in the stereo films that ye so successfully show, augmented by our lectures and stories and ourselves. Soon Chedi, Vir and Evisa will leave for the city if my conversation with the ruler is successful. Has Tail told ye that the officials of the council are outraged by the showing of the films?" asked Griff Rift. "Not yet. I expected this. I hope to deal with the lords in such a way that they do not harm those who have watched and will continue to watch. And don't stand so tree-like, dear one." Griff Rift spread his hands helplessly, avoiding Rodis's gaze. Suddenly he noticed behind her on the wall the colorful outlines of some figures. They had not been there before. Rodis shifted the focus of the screen while she herself stepped aside. The entire wall of her room was painted with bright, rough colors of Yanyak. The newly completed fresco Griff Rift immediately realized symbolized the ascent from the inferno. On terrible cliffs, helping one another, people scrambled with the last of their strength. Below, on the greasy grass, was a disparate crowd, pointing with contempt at the sweat-covered, wretched, and pale climbers. In the distance were groups of people, confident in their superiority, looking on with aloofness and indifference. This rise seemed tragically hopeless. High above, almost on the crest of the wall that covered the free lowland, a ledge jutted out like a sharp wedge, the last step of the ascent. A blue glow rose from the shadows, reflected in the rock. At the very edge of the outcrop, shackled with a shining chain, a woman was kneeling. Her hands with brutal force were pulled up to her back by the 3rd turn of the chain that encompassed her stomach and right thigh. The links of the chain cut into her naked body, slightly covered on the back by a black wave of hair. Bound, deprived of the opportunity to reach out to the climbers and even give an encouraging sign, she was nevertheless a symbol, the unshakable confidence of knowledge, as if she had concentrated in herself all the joys of consolation and hope. Chained faith seemed independent and free, as if there were no cruel bonds, death and suffering. By chance or deliberately, chained faith looked like Chedi. Why is it here? Griff Rift doubted. Will they understand? They will understand, Rodis said confidently. I want to leave in the palace the memory of us. They will destroy it, maybe? But before that, its reproductions will spread around the planet. Ye turn out to be stronger than me every time. Rift, having fallen into silence, looked at Rodis as if before parting. She leaned to the very edge of focus, moved her hands soothingly and gently. I began to dream of Amni Machen, a most high mountain in Asia. On a mountain plateau where a grove of Himalayan firs borders a treeless hill stands an ancient Buddhist temple, a haven for the weary. In this temple, a place of rest and reflection before the imperious rush of the mountains to the sky, huge gongs of pure gold color from a tantalum copper alloy sound at dawn and in the hours before sunset. Lingering, powerful sounds rush into the endless distance, and each blow is carried for a long time in the surrounding silence. The same feeling is caused by the belfries of ancient Russian churches, restored and equipped with titanium bells. These silvery bells resound with equally long notes of an especially pure tone, attracting from afar with a magical, irresistible call. And it was as if I were running to this call through a rare morning mist in the silver of dawn. And here, the dawn brings a sullen reminder of the unfinished. And it is only time that is running. Rodis quickly said goodbye and turned off the TVF. In the next room, Iviza Tanet was critically examining Chedi and Vir Noreen, dressed to go beyond the gardens of Zoam, down into the thick of life in the capital, inhabited, according to earthly concepts, with incredible density. "It's not working, Chedi," Iviza said resolutely. "A woman of Earth is visible from a kilometer away. If the people here are really poorly upbrought, then a whole crowd will follow behind ye. Well, and how about ye? I do not intend to wander the streets alone, like ye and Noreen. I will be accompanied by local colleagues. They will supply me with special medical clothing, canary yellow, so I have enough trousers and blouses." "There is only one way out," said the star pilot. "Let Teo, without attracting anyone's attention, bring us to his friends, and they will help us to dress. If they allow him, and if they let us go. Nothing can be done in the palace without special permission. We have learned this well." Chedi thrust her hands into her belt, pulled back her shoulders, and made the grimace of arrogant ill will, inherent in all the serpent-bearers of Tormance. It came off so closely that Vir and Iviza smiled, slightly dispelling the rare for earthling state of bitter sorrow induced by the tragedy in King Nante. People of the era of Met Hands were not afraid of death and steadfastly faced the inevitable accidents of life, full of active work, travel, extreme and bold recreation. However, the senseless death of 3 friends on a cruel planet was harder to bear than if it had happened at home. Were there not too few of them on Tormance? No, not if one gave it thought. It was easier for a small group to establish contact with the people of the planet. It was easier to feel its psychic atmosphere, to find the correct manner of behavior, and to more deeply understand the Tormancians. A large expedition would have fenced itself off from the way of everyday life and being of the world of Yanyak. It would have taken tens of years for the 2 worlds of blood brothers, so different in their ideas and sense of the world, to open up to each other. They were doing the right thing in immersing themselves into the human sea of Yanyak and dissolving in the stream of her life. Such thoughts compelled the Earthlings to train themselves in a particularly strict concentration of strength and senses. Of them remained 4, or rather 3, to establish contacts with the people of Tormance. Rodis remained a prisoner in the palace, and her great soul strength would not come into contact with the people of Yanyak. Probably, this was what the forward-thinking Choyo Chagas wished to avoid. It was not known whether he would allow them to live in the city. This was what Chedi, Vir, and Iviza were talking about when Rodis came to them. Rodis, pale from sleepless nights at the painting with which she tried to distract herself. Iviza pointed to a chair, but Rodis shook her head. "There are too many people sitting here, as it used to be on Earth, when man, a runner and a traveler by nature, fixedly sat himself down at the tables or in the chairs of transport vehicles, making his body and mind heavy." "Well, that's right," Iviza agreed, thinking about her own, and suddenly asked, "Fay, does it not seem to ye that this planet can no longer be raised from the inferno? That the disease has gone too far, poisoning people with a tainted inheritance, dysgenics? That the people of Tormance are no longer able to believe in anything and care only about the elementary pleasures for the sake of which they are ready for anything?" Iviza looked inquiringly at Rodis, who nodded encouragingly, and she continued, "If wild crowds roam the planet, if deserts come, devouring fertile soils, if mineral wealth is exhausted, if degradation is in everything and especially in the souls of people, then how, by what force will they rise? When the women of Tormance were asked to restrict childbearing 3 centuries ago, they saw it as an encroachment on the most sacred human rights. What rights? Not rights, but the usual instincts common to all animals, instincts that run counter to the needs of society. And they still cannot understand here that freedom can only come from great understanding and responsibility. There is no other freedom in the entire universe. It is not at all important for Tormancians to know that their children will be healthy, intelligent, strong, that a decent life awaits them. They submit to momentary desire, not at all thinking about the consequences, about the fact that they are throwing a new life into a miserable, mal-arranged world, giving it away into slavery, dooming to an untimely death. Can ye really expect that a child will be born a great person, knowing that such a probability is negligible? Is it possible to treat so lightly the most important, the most holy? Rodis kissed Eviza. Serious questions, Eviza, arose also in our home. In the critical epoch of the era of the divided world, with the beginning of the collapse of the capitalist European civilization, anthropologists drew attention to the Hopi Indians, who lived in the desert in the southwest of North America. They lived in conditions much worse than on Tormance, and nevertheless created a special society, in many respects close to communist, only at a low material level. The Hopi seemed like an example and hope to the scholars of the EDW: free women, collective care for children, upbringing by independent labor activity from early childhood, led the Hopi to high intelligence and psychic strength. To the surprise and confusion of European scholars, after 15 centuries of difficult and harsh conditions, the Hopi children were more capable than gifted white children. They were struck by their high intelligence, observation, complex, and abstract thinking. Naturally, they grew into people similar to modern earthlings, serious, thoughtful, and very active, guided not by external temptations and orders, but by an internal consciousness of necessity. Physically, the Hopi were also more perfect than the surrounding peoples. I remember a photograph of one girl. She looked very much like Chetty. So that means that the misery of Tormance will not interfere with the ascent? Asked Chetty, livening up. I am convinced of that, Rodis said firmly. As for genetics, compare the period of damage to the gene pool with the accumulation of healthy genes during the formation of a person on our planet, several thousand years, and 3 million. The answer is clear. And what to do with a hopelessly flawed psychology? Eviza asked. Ye are repeating the mistake of EDW psychologists, including the then famous Freud. They took the dynamics of psychic processes for statics, considering special entities like libido or mentality to be permanent, once and for all cast. In fact, only impulse flashes really exist, which are easy to coordinate with education and exercise. When they understood this simple thing, a turn began from the psychology of the owner and the egoist of capitalist society to the communist consciousness. It unexpectedly turned out that a high level of upbringing works wonders in the souls of people and in the structure of society. A trigger reaction began, an avalanche of kindness, love, self-discipline, and care, which immediately raised also the productive forces. People could have foreseen their rise if they had carefully thought about how strong the indescribably beautiful premonitions of youth are. Proof of the innate beauty of feelings that we carry in ourselves, actualized very little in previous epochs. But here, there is no faith in people and a better future. The astronavigator stood behind Eviza. And that's why the Tormanzians came to mysticism, Rodis said. When a person has no support in society, when he is not guarded but only threatened and he cannot rely on law and justice, he ripens for belief in the supernatural, his last refuge. At the end of the era of the divided world, mysticism intensified both in the tyrannies of state capitalism and in the countries of pseudo-socialism. Deprived of education, the ignorant masses lost faith in omnipotent dictators and rushed to sectarianism and mysticism. A new turn of the historical spiral returned the majority of humanity to the atheism of cognition. If we draw an analogy, now is the most favorable moment for a new real faith in man to settle in the people of Tormance. When did mysticism spread on earth? Eviza asked. In the blue cycle of the 17th circle. Historians for those times use the periodization adopted in the chronicles of the Bon Togolo monastery in Karakoram. The chroniclers who secluded themselves there impartially recorded the world events of the EDW, using a two-way system for comparing conflicting radio messages. The remoteness of the Buddhist monastery is the reason why the chronicles were preserved there. In those days, many historical documents in other countries perished. In Bantogolo, the most complete chronology has survived, and we use its calendar. Was the great battle between West and East, or the Battle of Mara, also in the 17th circle? Chetty asked. In the year of the red or fire chicken of the 17th circle, confirmed Fay Rodis, and lasted until the year of the red tiger. Comical chronology, said Eviza. It sounds archaically ridiculous. It is not as ridiculous as it seems at first glance. Each circle corresponds to the average duration of a human life, and therefore is perceived not only by the mind, but also by the senses. And in Bantogolo, there are chronicles from an earlier period? Eviza asked. They go far into the depths of time, from the era of amalgamation of formations. In the Dark Ages? Then they fall between the 5th and 13th circles. The EDW began in the 15th, came the quick calculation of Chetty. It ended in the black cycle of the 17th circle, added Rodis. Is it not time to stop with the search, whichever circle we are located in? Suggested Eviza. We torture Fay. In the year of the Blue Horse, 51st circle, Rodis laughed. Come to me. We have been thinking a lot lately. And we even forget to dance. A week later, a messenger from Choyo Chagas came to Rodis, the head of the Lilacs, Yangao Yuar, or Yangar for short, a large man with sharp features of a big face. His name alone made the engineer Tail look around cautiously. From under lowered as if in fatigue eyelids, the clear expressionless eyes of a bird of prey, ruthless and fearless, gazed intently. Subsequently, Engineer Tail explained that the head of the Lilacs always watched taking aim. He was a world-famous shooter of bullet pistols, like those possessed by the officers of the guards and dignitaries of Yangyak. Peering audaciously at the guests from Earth, seen for the first time up close, Yangar conveyed the invitation of the Lord. Fay Rodis promised to come in a few minutes, but the head of the Lilacs did not leave. I was ordered to accompany. I know the way to the Green Office. Not there, and I am ordered to accompany. Circumstances have changed, Rodis thought. Entering her room, she stood for a few minutes to concentrate and collect energy. The head of the Lilacs walked a step behind, not letting Fay Rodis test his psychic fortitude. Choyo Chagas, awaiting them, paced the red carpets. Tall and narrow windows let in little light, creating a beloved to the Tormanzians' pinkish twilight. This time the Lord did not invite the guests to sit down. Rodis, not seeing suitable furniture, crossed her legs and sank directly onto the carpet. Choyo Chagas raised his eyebrows, dismissed Yangar with a sign, and walking back and forth across the hall, stopped in front of Rodis, suspiciously and angrily looking down at her. We only showed films to those who craved knowledge, overcoming the inconvenient path to the starship and the risk of being captured by your cordons, Rodis said without waiting for the question. I forbade public showing, the Lord said with deliberation. And I warned ye not to interfere in the affairs of our planet. There was no public showing, Rodis replied sternly. Fulfilling your wish, we did not show films to the whole planet. Ye probably have a reason for this? I have forbidden them being shown to anyone. No state, no planet in the universe has the right to this. It is a sacred duty for each of us to break such unparalleled oppression. Who dares to close the path to cognition of the world to a thinking being? Fascist dictatorships of the past of the Earth and other worlds committed similar crimes, causing incredible disasters. Therefore, when a state is found in the Great Circle that closes the path to knowledge for its people, then such a state is destroyed. This is the only case that gives the right to direct interference in the affairs of an alien planet. Can some kind of circle judge a specific harm or benefit in someone else's life? Choyo Chagas shouted in fury. It cannot. But the prohibition to cognize art, sciences, life of other planets is inadmissible. In order to establish friendly relations and understanding with Yi, we made a concession without demanding an all-planetary screening of the films. Choyo Chagas made an indistinct sound and started walking around the hall faster than before. It is a pity for me, Rodis said quietly, that ye did not appreciate the stereo films we brought. They, in contrast to the oppressive hell collected by your ancestors there below, prove the ultimate victory of the human mind. But control? Who will vouch for the complete harmlessness of your films? This is propaganda of alien ideas, deception. The Communist Society of the Earth needs neither propaganda nor deception. Understand, Lord of the Planet? Rodis jumped to her feet. Why would Earth need this? Ye are an intelligent person, no matter how dictatorial conditions limit ye. Do ye not feel that our only desire, before we set off on our way back, was to give as much as possible to ye, to help your people find a way to another life? Without recompense. There is no greater joy for a person than to give and help. Understand this, finally. She held her hands intertwined in front of her face and froze a half step from Choyo Chagas, leaning forward like the teacher or a mother of a slow child. The passionate persuasiveness of Fay Rodis, words produced an impression on the Lord. He gazed thoughtfully at the floor and silently led Rodis to their usual meeting place, to the green room with black furniture and the crystal ball of divination. There he took his pipe and drew from its smoke with a pungent smell, already familiar to Rodis. People, said Choyo Chagas, covering the narrow lids of his eyes, are shadows that have no significance in history. Only their deeds live. Deeds are granite and lives are sand. This is an ancient saying. It is familiar to me too, from our common ancestors. But remember that the crowd and the ruler, the dialectical unity of opposites, do not exist separately. And both sides are ignorant, sadistically cruel, in spite with each other, especially when the contradiction between social complexity and spiritual poverty is brewing. Then it amazes me why ye care so much about the nameless crowds of Yanyach. These are people with whom ye can do whatever ye want. Rob, take away wives and lovers, drive them out of comfortable houses. It is only necessary to apply the old, like ours in the earthly world, method to praise them. Shout to them that they are great, beautiful, brave, and smart, and they will let ye do everything. But try to call them what they really are, ignorant, stupid, idiotic, and helpless mongrels. And the roar of indignation will drown out any reasonable appeal to them, although they live their whole lives in much worse humiliation. Ye, obviously from the films taken from the earth, learned the worst way to govern people, Rodis said reproachfully. But even then, our ancestors used a different method, an appeal to the common sense of people, the desire to explain to them the reasons for actions and prove the consequences. Then, by the deeply embedded in us sense of justness and sense of rightness, we will do much more and come through difficult trials, which has been proved by people of the past. It is impossible to always choose the easy way. You may find yourself in a hopeless inferno. A difficult and fruitful path is unthinkable with a large number of people. The more people, the more selection of minds, the combined efforts of which have given the earth its noosphere, mighty and pure. Modern man is the result of the fusion of various branches that have converged over millions of years. Therefore, his heredity keeps many psychological entities, and the difference between individuals is very great. This is the key to improvement and a barricade against the transformation of humanity into an ant society. The fusion of various types of psychological structures, which will always behave differently in the general flow of culture, is the greatest miracle and evidence of the wonderful qualities of a person in the guiding framework of social consciousness. And billions of fools and psychopaths, crushing the truth into petty revelations and creating a great confusion of opinions? A wise man wrote about knowledge as a fat that clogs the brain. It, for them, is such. Why should they live, wasting the last resources of the planet? Ye have already achieved a steady decline in the birth rate among your intelligentsia. Ye strive to rid people of attachments in order to turn them into an instrument of oppression and power. Well, this is a natural result of a tyrannical attitude towards people. Information from engineer Tolo Frael, exclaimed Choyo Chagas, as if incriminating Rodis. By the way, did he know about the transmission of stereo films? A sickening feeling of having to lie came to Rodis. In the world of Tormance, strict observance of the laws of the earth could always lead to dire consequences. I guessed long ago that he was obliged to inform, she answered evasively. Choyo Chagas differently understood the disgust that flashed in the face of Rodis and smiled smugly. It became clear to Rodis that the threat to tail had passed. She lowered her eyes to hide the slightest shade of her emotions from Choyo Chagas, whose eyes were fastened intently on her. Answer straight, could ye kill me? He asked suddenly. Rodis was no longer surprised by the sudden leaps of the thoughts of Chagas. What for? She asked calmly. To remove me and weaken the power. Eliminate ye. In your place will instantly be another, even worse. Ye are at least intelligent. At least, the Lord cried with anger. Your social system does not ensure the coming to power of intelligent and decent people. This is its basic trouble. Moreover, according to the law discovered back in the era of the divided world by Peter, there is a tendency in this system for increase in the incompetence of the ruling circles. Choyo Chagas wanted to argue, restrained himself, and insinuatingly asked, and technically, could ye kill me? And with what? At any moment. By ordering to die. I too could destroy ye in the blink of an eye. Rodis shrugged her shoulders with purely feminine contempt. In that case, the commander of our spaceship vowed to dig the surface of the entire Yanyak a kilometer deep. But you do not commit murders, and would surely forbid him. I would not be alive then, Rodis smiled, and he is the commander. Choyo Chagas thoughtfully tapped his fingers on the table, and, as if in response, an invisible bell rang softly. From the way the chairman of the Council of the Four became alarmed, it became clear to Fay Rodis that the signal was heralding something very important. She rose, but the Lord, looking into the apparatus, hidden from Rodis by a wall of carved wood, imperiously pointed her toward the chair. Your ship is calling ye. A starship is approaching Yanyath. Of the Earth? Oh no, Rodis exclaimed so confidently that the Lord looked at her with suspicion. I am not expecting it soon, she added, understanding his thoughts. Can you make contact with this new alien? Of course, if their planet is part of the Great Circle. I wish to attend. Rodis had learned enough about the customs of Tormance. The Lord should not be invited either to oneself or to any other place. They came to him only at his call. Virnorine rushed in with 2 SDPs. In the green room, with invariably amazing to the Tormanzians reality, the cockpit of the Dark Flame appeared, with the starship pilots gathered in alarm. Oladez was manipulating the wave selector. The signals from the approaching ship were outside the spectrum of the Great Circle. Here, Oladez pulled the black lever at the top of the console and simultaneously kicked down the red pedal, including both the computing machine and the memory machine, to compute the extraordinary spectrum of transmission. The cockpit was filled with the lingering, quivering ring of an untuned carrier wave. On a large screen in the cockpit of the starship, fragments of images flashed, building and crumbling. Choyo Chagas shut his eyes so as not to succumb to an attack of dizziness. The flicker slowed down, parts of the shattered picture stuck on the screen as if caught in a net. Finally, they formed into a vision of an unusual ship. It had 4 planes of several layers of grandiose pipes, intersecting on a giant longitudinal cylinder, like 4 musical organs connected in an oblique cross. In the pipes pulsed a pale flame, running in a ring around the entire structure. The image of the starship grew, swallowed the entire screen, dissolved in it. Only the crescent-shaped protrusion of the longitudinal cylinder remained against the background of the bottomless blackness of the cosmos. From the crescent-shaped recess, luminous, like 8s, signs flew out and whirled ahead. They alternated vertically and horizontally, now in separate groups, now in a continuous chain. The vision lasted no more than a minute and was replaced by a picture of the interior of the ship. 3 planes intersected at different angles. The alien architecture could hardly be guessed from the perspective of the transmitter. Attention was drawn to 6 motionless figures, sunk in deep seats in front of a sloping triangle-shaped wall that gleamed like a black mirror. A dim silvery purple light ran in serpentine streams along the slanting planes of the ceiling. The room, now plunged into twilight, now flashed with blinding illumination without shadows and transitions. The pulsation of lighting made it difficult to make out the details. All 6 figures motionlessly sat in a human way, dressed in what looked like dark cloaks with pointed hoods that hid the faces of the mysterious creatures. The Earthlings could not judge the size of the ship. Nothing appeared on the screen even remotely familiar to the cosmic experience of the Great Circle. Occasional flashes of light, frozen dark figures, strangely broken and skewed body mounts. All this acted depressingly. An incomprehensible force rushed from the depths of the universe. Apparently the ship was approaching. A vibrating groan grew steadily, like the sound of metal breaking. This sound, extinguishing and reviving with renewed vigor with each flash of light, made a person shudder in inexplicable aversion. In complete awe, she could not convey what she felt at those moments. Oladez dampened the sound background and turned on the transmitter of the Dark Flame. In a few seconds, the machines identified a target and directed a beam at it, repeating the known throughout the galaxy call of the Great Circle. Nothing changed in the transmission from the unknown starship. The same running across of silvery flashes, just as motionlessly and sullenly sat the figures in impenetrable hoods. Oladez intensified the call on the same wavelength as the alien starship. A column of blue light, a cascade power indicator, rose to the end of the tube. Oladez opened the sound channel and immediately reduced it to a minimum. The sorrowful moan was impossible to listen to. The dark flame called out, switching to different codes. The moaning sound gradually faded. It became apparent that the alien starship was moving away, ignoring the signals. For some time, the screen showed the four-edged outline of the ship, but this also merged with the darkness of the cosmos. With the cheerful ringing into the row of indexes of the main locator ran a string of numbers. Course 336 to 11 on the northern limb of the galaxy, level 4, speed 0.88, said div symbol. It is going across the galaxy, roughly from the hair of Veronica, above the level of the major condensations, said Griffrift. Strange that it's moving in ordinary space. Its speed is not great. It will take it more than 100,000 Earth years to cross. Virnorine loudly responded from the Palace of the Lord. From unexpectedness, Choyo Chagas and several of the dignitaries who were present turned sharply in his direction. And are they living, those who are in the starship? Menticor asked the question that tormented all the starship pilots. And will the starship go on without end? Asked Choyo Chagas, referring to Fay Rodis. Menticor answered for her. Until the energy reserved for the automatic course correctors runs out, the starship is invulnerable. But after that, in the rarefied zone of the 4th level, the chances of an encounter with a cluster of matter are so insignificant that it could transpierce the entire galaxy and hurl for more than 1 million years. A million years, Choyo Chagas said slowly and, catching himself, frowned. Is it customary on Earth to answer when not asked? He said menacingly, looking only at Rodis. Even in the presence of elders? It is customary, Rodis replied. If several people have a conversation, the one who answers is the one who had previously formulated the answer. Seniority does not carry significance. I am implying age. And the title similarly holds no weight? In the discussion of a question, none. Anarchists. Choyo Chagas grunted, getting up. At a sign from Rodis, Olidez cut the connection. The SDP projectors ceased their soft hum. The hall of the palace, hung with bright fabrics, assumed its usual appearance, as if there was no grim specter of a ship that had flashed past the planet, sending into space an incomprehensible moaning call. The Earthlings were shocked by the meeting with the interstellar wanderer. There was something hopeless, infernal in the throwing of light among the sharply crossed metal planes of the empty hull of the ship. The oppressive melancholy seized, apparently, not only the Earthlings. Choyo Chagas, without saying a word, walked into his chambers with an uncharacteristic tired gait. Behind him, 2 lilacs walked inaudibly, looking contemptuously at the group of close ones following in the distance. Fay Rodis had in vain feared that her companions would be detained for several more days. Engineer Teo handed Chedi, Eviza, and Virnorine pieces of flexible plastic, speckled with badges and covered with transparent film. The cards gave the right to appear in all establishments, meetings, and institutions of the city of the Center of Wisdom. To the great surprise of the Earthlings, it turned out that only a few residents of the capital had such a right. Most had cards of a different kind, limiting the rights of their owners. A person without a card was considered illegal. He was seized and, after inquiry, either sent to another area of the planet, where physical labor was required, or, if there was not a need in this, he was condemned to an easy death. Tail escorted the 3 Earthlings, together with their SDPs, outside the restricted area of the Gardens of Zoam and, handing them over to the escorts, returned. He found Fay Rodis by the transparent wall of the hall, into which the doors of the empty rooms opened. Without a spacesuit, in a short wide skirt with a bodice, she had become closer, more homely. Rodis gazed into the garden, where the branches of the trees shook, eagerly stretching out the funnels of their branches to the sky. Teo suddenly thought how the so dear to his heart plants must seem to Earthlings alien. And the lonely Rodis, in attire frivolously youthful by the standards of Yanyach, seemed to him a captive, yearning and defenseless. The engineer forgot everything. The long-held feeling burst out with a force unexpected for even himself. He dropped to one knee, imitating, without knowing it, the ancient knights of Earth. Grabbing the lowered hand of Fay Rodis, he began to warmly, expressively, and hastily confess his love. Rodis listened to him without moving and without surprise, as if everything that the Tormanzians said had long been known to her. Teo looked into her eyes, trying to read, or at least guess the answer. shining like with all earthlings, the fabulous green eyes of the inhabitant of the earth, under external affection, concealed unshakable courage and vigilance, stood guard over her inner world. And, breaking against this invisible wall, the dreams and utterances of love, which raised the engineer to one level with Fay Rodis, were extinguished. Tail lowered his head and fell silent, continuing to kneel at Rodis, feet in a pose that already seemed ridiculous to him. Fay Rodis squeezed his joined palms and lifted him easily. She wanted to put her hands on Tail's shoulders, but he, knowing their soothing power, recoiled, almost indignant. According to the well-known human law, which is the same for Earth and Tormance, a man who would beg for love could more easily endure refusal than friendly sympathy. Not pity, no, the Tormangian did not feel pity for himself, and for this he was grateful to his chosen one, who did not move away from him and at the same time was so impossibly distant. "Forgive me," Tail said with dignity. "I was lost in a dream, and it seemed to me. In a word, I forgot that ye cannot have love for us, the lower beings of an abandoned planet." "We can, Tail," Rodis replied quietly. The engineer squeezed the fingers of his hands behind his back to the point of pain. Again, breaking his will and compressing his chest, the dangerous power of the earthly woman seized him. "Then," he muttered, regaining hope anew, "look through the eyes of the earth, Tail. Ye have seen our life. Find me a place in yours, for love is only in a common path. Otherwise, it is only a physical passion that is carried out and passes, having fulfilled its purpose. Its periods do not happen often, because they require such an uplift of feelings and tension of forces that for an unequal partner, they pose a mortal danger." For the engineer, the mentoring turn which her explanation had taken became unbearable and offensive, although he perfectly understood that Fay Rodis was speaking to him trustingly, directly, and, most importantly, as an equal. Engineer Tail said goodbye and wandered towards the exit, trying to keep with the independence and dignity of an earthling. Fay Rodis aggrievedly looked after him and suddenly called out, "Come back, I have something important to say." Rodis led him to her room and closed the door tightly. The SDP hummed. Activating the protective field, Rodis recounted her conversation with Choyo Chagas. The Tormanzian listened to her with a faint smile, which among the inhabitants of the planet Yanyak covered the bitterness of impotence. "Ye said that I am obliged to inform?" he asked. Rodis nodded. "So this is precisely true, and I have been reporting all this time, otherwise is impossible for me. Why? A day without a report, and I would not be able to see ye. Never again. What then have ye reported? Oh, this is a dangerous game. Tell the truth that will not hurt ye, keep silent about the important, invent a half-truth. Ye are dealing with smart enemies, but half-truths, invented for political deception, are suitable as a weapon against them themselves. Why are ye playing such a game? What do ye mean why? And the tens of thousands of the people of Yanyak who have seen the communist earth, and the knowledge with which ye have armed us, and the joy of communicating with ye, the happiest of fates has befallen me. To see another life, fantastically wonderful, to stand on the border of two worlds. To understand, to believe, to be convinced of the possibility of an aggression for the people of Yanyak. Forgive me, Tail, Fay Rodis said respectfully as to an elder. I still know so little and make offensive mistakes. What are you saying, star of mine? Exclaimed the shocked Tal, backing towards the door. Rodis forcefully pulled him by the hand and sat him down on a large sofa. The earthlings had sat in it many times. A strange sense of detachment gripped the engineer, as if all this was happening to another, and he himself was an outside witness to the conversation of the inhabitants of different worlds. Fay Rodis climbed onto the sofa with her legs drawn up and her arms around her bare knees. She now regarded the Tormancing engineer in a different way, understanding the origin of those deep wrinkles furrowing his forehead, why the suffering and eternally adamant brow frowned over the bright and keen eyes of the thinker, why there were deep folds running from the wings of the nose to the cheeks far below, bypassing the corners of the full, always compressed lips, why infrequent prematurely gray hair showed through in the beard and mustache. As usual, Fay Rodis put her fingers on the hand of the engineer, establishing a bodily contact that helped to feel a person so distant in his habits and so close in his aspirations. Tail gazed thoughtfully and sadly. The more than once experienced by him sensation of cosmic abysses, as if opening up behind Rodis came again, and the Tormanzian shuddered. Rodis pressed his hand with more strength, quietly asking, "Be open with me, Teo. How are ye threatened? What looms over ye? And obviously, every inhabitant of Yanyak. It depends on the fault. If I break my obligation to inform, then I will be exiled. I will have to leave for some distant city, because there will be no work for me in the capital. And if it turns out that ye have used your communication with us to transfer our information to your friends, I will be accused of high treason. They will arrest me, they will torture me, to turn over the participants who will, in their turn, be tortured. They will betray the rest and a few hundred others who are not involved, just to be rid of the excruciating torment. After this, everyone will be destroyed." Rodis shuddered, although all of it was familiar to her. But now it was not history that was unfolding before her, not the drowned in millennia experiences of the ancient people of the earth. The very life of Tormance in the image of Engineer Teo regarded her meekly and sadly. In this serenity there was more tragedy than in a cry of despair. And the room, shielded by the quietly humming SDP, seemed to Rodis a fragile raft in a hostile ocean, where the coast in all directions was equally distant and unreachable. "I am not afraid of them," said Teo, "and not because I am confident in my strength. No one can resist. What is told in the legends about unbending people is either a lie or evidence of the lack of skill of the executioners. There are people of the highest heroism, but if ye apply sufficiently extended and sufficiently strong torture to them, they will also break down, turn from a human into a cowed, half-dead animal, carrying out orders in a state of semi-sleep. And what do ye hope for? For my own weakness. The executioners first destroy the person physically. The second stage is the breaking of the psyche. I will die in the first stage, and they will not achieve anything." Fay Rodis straightened up, sighing. The Tormanzian couldn't take his eyes off her raised breasts. Obscene and shameful according to the morals of Yanya, nonetheless the woman of Earth accepted the gaze of the engineer as a natural tribute to the attraction of a man. Fay Rodis thought that nature, despite the relentless cruelty of the evolutionary process, still turns out to be more humane than man. Man, inventing thin, deeply penetrating weapons, arrows, spears, bullets, sharply increased the inferno of torment on Earth, discarding the combat tactics of a predatory beast based on the shock of the first strike, rupture of large vessels, and painless death from blood loss. Human victims began to die in terrible agony from deep internal inflammation. And when the mentally disabled got to the point of sadism, they created a hellish torture technique that was immediately used for political and military purposes. And now the children of the Earth have returned to a similar world, long erased from the face of their own planet. Fay Rodis ran her hand through the hair of the engineer. "Listen, Teo, keep informing them. Ye know we have no secrets. We will take ye into the dark flame. We will heal, give strength to your body, training of the psyche. Ye will comprehend how to govern your body, senses, subjugate people to yourself, if it is necessary for your cause. And ye will come back here as a different person. This requires just 2 to 3 months." The Tormanzian got up from the sofa and shook his head emphatically. "No, Rodis," he pronounced the earthly name, unusual for the sharp language of Tormance, melodiously and tenderly. "I cannot become perfectly healthy among the sick people of my planet. I cannot, because I know how much time and effort ye have to spend on yourself in order to maintain this level. After all, I did not receive an ideal body as an inheritance from my ancestors. One approach towards your strength will require so much time and attention for myself that I will not have enough for more important things: kindness, love, compassion, and concern for others, in which I see my duty. There is little love and kindness in our world. Few gifted people have not wasted their spiritual strength on trifles like career, a life rich in material resources, or power. I was born weak, but with love for people, and should not leave this path. Thank ye, Rodis." Rodis went quiet, gazing at the engineer, and then her starry eyes extinguished, covered by lowered eyelashes. "Good, Teo, your motives are wonderful. Ye are a truly strong person. The future of the planet is in the hands of people like ye. But accept just one gift from me. It will free ye from the fear of possible torment and place ye outside of the power of the executioners. If ye find it necessary, ye may pass it on to others." She looked at the engineer again. Did he understand? Yes, ye have guessed surely. I will teach ye the ability to die instantly at any moment, of your own free will, using nothing but the internal forces of the organism. From time immemorial, all tyrants have hated above all those people who, of their own will, exited from under their power over life and death. The right to control life and death became the inalienable right of the Lord. And people believed in this fetishism, supported by the Christian Church. Over the millennia of civilizations that have passed on Earth, they have invented nothing but painful methods of suicide, available to the beast. Only the sages of India understood early on that by making a person the master of their own death, they liberate him from fear of life. Rodis reflected and asked, but maybe with your duty of early death, all this is not so important as in ancient times on Earth. It is very important, Tail exclaimed. Gentle death is also entirely in the hands of the oligarchy, and no one enters into its palace without permission. And for us, educated long living, the dependence of life and death on the Lord's is absolute. Choose the time, Rodis said resolutely. With your lack of mental training, we will need several lessons. So much. This is impossible to master without an experienced teacher. Ye need to know how to stop your heart at any desired moment. As soon as an ordinary person of Yanyak begins to slow down his heart, the brain, not receiving the oxygen and nutrition it needs every second, will immediately spur it up. Therefore, to slow down the heart, it is necessary to put the brain to sleep, but then self-control is lost and the lesson will end in death. My task is to teach ye not to lose self-control until the last step in life. Thank ye, Tail exclaimed happily. Boldly taking both hands of Rodis, he covered them with kisses. She freed her hands and, lifting the head of the engineer, kissed Tail herself. I could never have imagined that I would give a person in love with me the gift of death. How infinitely strange and sad is life in the power of Inferno. Noticing that Tail was looking at her in bewilderment, she added, one of the ancient legends of the earth speaks of the goddess of sorrow, who consoled mortals with poisoned wine. I remember this legend, and now I know that it came from our common ancestors. Only we say that wine was made from vines that grew on the grave of love. Ye too? Us too. And it is so, goddess of sorrow. Until tomorrow? Good? Engineer Tail turned off the screening himself and, without turning around, left, carefully closing the heavy and high door. Fay Rodis lay down on the sofa, her chin resting on her crossed arms. She reflected on her dual role on the planet Yanyak. The clever ruler, having made her an unofficial prisoner of his palace, had isolated her from the people of Yanyak. And at the same time, he had unwittingly given her the opportunity to penetrate into the very essence of power over the planet, to study the oligarchic system, which would have been extremely difficult for a person of a higher communist society to understand. The basis of the oligarchy, it seemed, was extremely simple and had been practiced since ancient times on Earth, taking various forms from tyrannical dictatorships in Assyria, Rome, Mongolia, Central Asia, to the very last types of nationalism in the capitalist West, which inevitably led to fascism. When they declare themselves to be solely, and in all cases, right, this automatically entails the extermination of all open dissidents, that is, the most intelligent part of the people. To prevent the revival of willfulness and liberty, the oligarchs set themselves the task of breaking the will of their subjects, crippling them mentally. And everywhere they try to involve scientists in the realization of this task. Fortunately, the degradation of biological sciences on Tormance did not allow such scientists to achieve serious success in those sinister branches of biology, which in some countries of the Earth had almost led to the transformation of the majority of the people into blunt, cheap robots, obedient executors of any will. Here, on an impoverished planet, the means of spiritual breakdown were not complex: terror and hunger, plus complete malfeasance in education and upbringing. The spiritual values of knowledge and art accumulated by peoples for millennia were withdrawn from circulation. Instead, they instilled a pursuit of imaginary values for things that became all the worse to the measure of the collapse of the economy, which was inevitable with the decline in the moral psychological quality of people. On Earth, with the diversity of countries and peoples, the oligarchy never achieved such undivided power as on Tormance. At any moment, anywhere on the planet, the lords could do whatever they wanted at the utterance of just a few words. An explanation of the necessity or an explanation of ongoing events was afforded to the scientists' servants. This absolute power often fell into the hands of psychically abnormal people. At one time on Earth, it was the paranoid, with their frantic energy and fanatical conviction in their rightness, who became political or religious leaders. As a result, among the physically weaker, the number of people with a manic-depressive psyche increased sharply. Fear became the basis of their life. Fear of punishment, the sword of Damocles of chronic dread. Anything in any way so as not to make a mistake, to commit a punishable offense. On Tormance, the lords were not afraid of resistance and, fortunately, were devoid of a paranoid complex and the mania of persecution, and this circumstance, no doubt, had spared the lives of millions of people. Oh, these dreams of a golden sky, dreams of a pier with ships that fly. Rodis recalled the lines of the ancient poet of Russia. Most of all, she loved Russian poetry of that time for its purity and faithfulness to man. Dreams had not come true at all the way the poet had envisioned. With the development of technical civilization, an increasing number of people were excluded from active participation in life, for they acted in a very narrow sphere of their specialty, no longer knowing anything or being able to do anything. Before the era of the divided world, the average person on Earth was a rather versatilely developed personality. He could build a dwelling or a ship with his own hands, knew how to handle a horse and a cart, and, as a rule, was always ready to fight with a sword in his hands in the ranks of the army. And then, when the people became more, they became meaningless appendages to their narrow and small professions, passive passengers of various means of transportation. If one imagines humanity in the form of a pyramid, then the higher it is, the sharper and less numerous the top, consisting of the active part of people, and the wider the base. If earlier an individual was multifaceted and strong, then with the growth of the pyramid, with the loss of interest in life, it became weaker and more incapable. Many thinkers of the EDW considered boredom, loss of interest in life, more dangerous than atomic war. Whatever the elite of the upper strata, it became increasingly difficult for the lower, and the inferno deepened. With such a trend, the civilization that grew out of technocratic capitalism had to collapse, and collapse it did. The hierarchical pyramid of power on Tormance appeared to Rodis as a stepped pile of layers sharply expanding from top to bottom. It rested on a broad foundation. A billion surely uneducated, incapacitated, awarded the happiness of dying young. Our scientists and my kin Rook were absolutely right, thought Rodis, speaking of the multiplication of inferno, since there is no way out for the lower layers of the pyramid. It must be destroyed, but the pyramid is the most stable of all buildings. Eliminating the top does not solve anything. In place of the removed ones, a new vertex from the underlying layer will immediately appear. The base of the pyramid must be destroyed, and for this it is necessary to give the needed information precisely to the Choyo. Rodis summoned the dark flame. It was necessary to consult with Griff. Griff Rift appeared 3, alas, impassable, steps in front her. He was delighted with the extra program meeting. Rodis talked about the pyramid, and Griff Rift took thought. Yes, this is the only possible way out. Incidentally, this is the old method of all true revolutions. The time will come, and the pyramid will collapse, but only when the forces below accumulate, capable of organizing a different society. Let your engineer understand that this requires the alliance of the lowly with the Choyo. Otherwise, Tormance will not come out of the inferno. The gap between lowly and the Choyo is the axial pivot of the oligarchy. They cannot do without one or without the other, but they themselves exist only on account of their separation. The lowly and the Choyo are struggling equally in the strongest cage, created by the efforts of both classes. The more they are at enmity, the stronger and more hopeless the cage. It is necessary to supply them not only with information, but also with weaponry. We cannot blindly hand out weapons, said Rodis, and society-wide information is too slow. Now the main thing for them is means of defense, not attack, or rather means of defense against despotism. Two powerful tools, DPE, Detector of Psychology, and SMI, Short-Term Memory Inhibitor, will protect nascent groups from spies and allow them to grow and mature. I agree, but information should be disseminated otherwise, said Rift. We started out naively and created a dangerous situation. I advise you to announce the cessation of the screening of the films. Ye tell the truth, and we will prepare 1,000,000 cartridges, 100 of which will imperceptibly fit into any pocket. Instead of a session of stereo films, we will distribute cartridges with video information on all the necessary themes. Those who have seen the films will confirm that the information is the real truth, selected for the confused and in the dark. Today I realized that, in addition to the DPE, it is necessary that they receive psychological training in order to free them from the fear of persecution and from the fetishization of power. Here the relationship between the people and the state has diverged too far. It stands over them as an unkind and omnipotent force. The time has come for them to understand that in terms of rights, each individual and people are univocal and not antagonists. The transition of singularity to multiplicity, and vice versa, this is what they do not understand at all, confusing ends and means, technique and cognition, quality and quantity. Griff Rift grinned mirthlessly. I don't understand why this civilization still exists. Indeed, the law of Sened Rob is violated here. If they have reached high technology and almost approached the mastering of the cosmos, and have not cared about moral well-being of far greater importance than material, then they can't have crossed threshold of Rob. Not a single society, low according to its moral ethical level, can cross this without self-destruction. And yet they have crossed it. How could you not have guessed, Rift? Their civilization from the very beginning was monolithic, just like the people, no matter what states they temporarily split into. The iron lid of the oligarchy slammed down on the entire planet, removed the threat of the threshold of Rob, but also destroyed the possibility of aggression from the Inferno. I agree, but what about the arrow of Ahriman? We shall see. Rodis became alert and hastily added, They are coming. Goodbye, Griff. Prepare cartridges of information, and we will think about themes when ye gather everyone to council. And more DPEs and SMIs, all forces into them. Rodis switched off the SDP and sat down on the sofa, sensing the approach of a stranger. There was a knock on the door. A tall and thin old serpent-bearer appeared. The great chairman invites the mistress of the Earthlings to spend the evening in his chambers. He expects ye in... The dignitary raised his eyes to the wall, where circular luminous stripes oscillated on a large clock, and saw the painting by Fay Rodis. The old man lost his solemn speech and hastily finished, in 2 time cycles. Thanking him, Rodis dismissed the messenger. Again, something new, she thought, going up to the mirror and critically examining her modest attire. Women of the earth, born artists, love to play reincarnation. Changing their appearance, they rebuilt themselves in accordance with the adopted image. During the journey on the starship, Oladez reincarnated as a marquise of the end of the feudal era. Nea Holly became a naughty girl of the EDW, and Tevisa Hanako became a geisha of ancient Japan. The men were less interested in this, because of the poverty of imagination and a purely masculine dislike towards the working out of details. Rodis, turning in front of the mirror and sorting out suitable guises, settled on a woman of old India, a Maharani. The attire of an Indian woman, a sari, fit the occasion, both for the simplicity of execution and because no other dress so merges with its wearer. The sari accurately conveys the mood and feelings of a woman. It can become an impenetrable armor and, as it were, dissolve on the body, opening all its contours. Rodis skillfully took advantage of the few means at her disposal. After adjusting the SDP, she took an ion shower and an electric massage, then increased the pigmentation of her skin to the hue of a golden brown tinga fruit. Short hair, parted at the crown of the head and tightly curled at the back, formed a large knot. A piece of titanium wire, polished to a mirror shine, Rodis broke into pieces and turned into rings, wearing them like chiming bracelets on her wrists and ankles. A length of snow-white fabric decorated with silver stars became her sari, shorter than in the old days. She painted a dark dot between her eyebrows and paced the room in order to adapt her movements to the outfit. She regretted not having beautiful earrings with her. About half an hour remained. She concentrated, conjured up slowly, sailing pictures of ancient India. Cheerful, a little excited, under the light chiming of her bracelets, she entered the green cabinet, spreading around the pleasant, barely perceptible scent of a healthy body, refreshed by a tonic airstream. Choyo Chagas got to his feet slightly quicker than usual. He greeted Rodis, as always, mockingly, but was clearly delighted in her. Only in the depths of his narrow eyes was the usual suspicious wariness hidden. Zug and General Shi were sitting at the table in black chairs, and at the drapery stood the tall and thin serpent-bearer who had come for Fay Rodis. On her appearance, he sighed with relief and sat down on a heavy stool with strange legs. From behind the curtain that concealed the inner door, a very tall, stately woman confidently walked into the middle of the room. From the way the members of the council greeted her, Fay Rodis gauged her position in the complex hierarchy of Tormance. She was significantly taller than Rodis, with long, perhaps over-thin legs, athletic shoulders, and a regal bearing. A narrow and severe face, sharp slanted eyes under straight eyebrows, a high shock of black hair. The singular adornment of the stranger was earrings, each of 10 spheres glowing with red lights, casting wild reflections over the slightly sunken cheeks and high cheekbones of the woman. Her shoulders and chest were strongly exposed. 2 narrow ribbons cut into the delicate skin, supporting the dress. In everyday life on Tormance, under no circumstances was the full baring of breasts permitted. A woman, even if she had done it by accident, was considered disgraced. At the same time, in the evenings, women for some reason were allowed to appear almost completely naked. This moral complexity Rodis had not yet been able to comprehend. Fay Rodis enjoyed the ferocious beauty of the stranger and her artistic ability to display herself. Every curl of her casually combed hair was arranged with a calculated effect. The woman serenely regarded the earthly guest, barely narrowing her cold eyes and parting her large, well-outlined, unkind mouth. Choyo Chagas waited a few seconds, as if he wished to let the women contemplate one another, but was in fact unceremoniously comparing the two. Utopia, my friend and advisor in state affairs, he announced at last, and the mistress of the earthlings is known to the whole planet. Chagas' friend chortled and lifted her proud head, as if to say, I, too, am known to the whole planet. She extended her hand to Fay Rodis, who, according to the custom of Yan Yak, offered her own. The strong, hot hand of the woman gripped her fingers tightly. I thought travelers of the cosmos dressed otherwise, she said, not hiding her surprise at the outfit of Rodis. On a journey, of course, but in ordinary life as it comes to the mind. And precisely this outfit came to your mind today? Asked Utopia. Today I felt the desire to be a woman of the ancient peoples of the earth, replied Rodis. Utopia shrugged her shoulders, as if saying, I see right through your contrivances. Choyo Chagas seated the women at the table, already decked with colorful cups of a fragrant, refreshing drink. The chairman of the Council of the Four was in good spirits. He even handed Rodis her cup himself. Fay Rodis decided to seize the moment. After the conversation with Tail and Rift, she had been haunted by the thought of the frivolity with which they had begun the showing of films in spite of the ban of the oligarch. Indeed, the powerful visitors from Earth were not afraid of the authorities of Tormance. The attempts of the authorities to prevent the people from learning about their beautiful ancestral home broke against their strength. And at the same time, the wise dialecticians of the Earth had forgotten about the other side, about those to whom they passed the forbidden information, thereby forcing them into committing a crime. No matter how wild it seemed in the eyes of the people of the communist world of the Earth, those thirsty for knowledge were subject to serious punishment. And they, the astronauts, had provoked this danger. Remaining untouchable, they had brought the defenseless people of Tormance face to face with the terrible apparatus of power, oppression, betrayal, and espionage. My friends and I considered our misconduct after my conversation with ye, Rodis began quietly. And? Choyo Chagas frowned impatiently, clearly having no wish to speak here of business. And we came to the conclusion that we were wrong. We have stopped our broadcasts, and we convey to ye our apologies. Is it really so? Choyo Chagas was surprised and softened. This is pleasant news. I see that our conversations are not in vain. Oh no, Rodis exclaimed with genuine enthusiasm and absolutely truthfully, which gave the Lord even more pleasure. Choyo Chagas inquired of Rodis as to the progression of her painting. She was surprised only for an instant. It could not have been otherwise. Concerning her work, there had likely been many denouncements. I imagined it finished. In fact, it will have to be redone. The concept is erroneous. To find the way out of the inferno, you need first of all measure and not faith. A pity, said Chagas indifferently. I was reckoning on viewing it in the coming days. Utopia suddenly turned pink, flashing her eyes. Yangar, the head of the Lilacs, entered unceremoniously. Approaching the Lord, he began to say something to him in an undertone. Fay Rodis got up and walked over to the vitrine, admiring the skill of an old drawing. Choyo Chagas, displeased, dismissed Yangar and asked why Rodis had left. The Lord of the planet did not like it when people stood up without permission. I did not want to disturb ye. On the planet Yanyak, everything is rushed and everything is secret. In vain. Nothing important, Choyo Chagas said discontentedly, while Yangar stared at the earthly guest, hoping to embarrass her with his cold look of the judge and executioner. Choyo Chagas with a sharp gesture sent Yangar away, and he leaned on the armrest closer to Rodis. Efremov continued to look askance at Rodis, and suddenly, unable to resist any longer, brusquely asked her where and how on earth the art of seduction is taught. If ye mean the ability to behave in such a way as to be liked by men in a delightful game of mutual attraction, then, from childhood, every woman on earth knows how to emphasize in herself that which is original, interesting, beautiful. It seems to me that the seduction about which ye are thinking is something different. This is the ability to make a man fall in love with ye, said the Tormancian. Then I see no difference. Maybe not only skill, but also an innate ability. It seemed to me that ye said this word with a tinge of condemnation, as about something bad. Seduction is always, to some extent, a deception, falsehood. This is the first time I see ye, but I was told that ye are not so. All those present, except ye, know me also in other guises, different ones. And what then is the real one, the one I visit most often? Here, on the planet Yanyak, I wear the appearance of the head of the earthly expedition and historian, but even this appearance is also not permanent and will change over time. I will be different on Earth, completely different, Rodis finished dreamily. Efremov raised a cup to her lips, took a sip and said something quietly to Zug. The lady friend of Choyo Chagas was outwardly more spectacular than Rodis. The writers and court poets of Yanyak wrote that her attraction acted as an electric current. Her female being was just screaming. The writers of Yanyak noted that she aroused such a passionate desire that even a chained animal at the sight of her was liable to break his leash. Efremov exuded mysteriousness. It was as though she stood on the line beyond which lay the forbidden area. For millennia, this feminine secret promised much more than it gave, and yet remained attractive even to experienced people. Efremov smiled, and suddenly fine wrinkles appeared on the young, smooth skin, communicating the fact that this extraordinary woman had had to experience a lot on her female path. Fay Rodis, despite the Maharani mask, remained the same direct, open, and fearless woman who had struck the Lord from the first meeting. Her inner world, obviously, was governed by balance and the ability to quickly restore peace in herself. Qualities that are possible only with an abundance of psychological strength and will. That is why, in contrast to the flawed psyche of Yanyak, these brilliant human qualities, a complete absence of hostility, suspicion, or self-satisfaction, still did not attract the Tormancians to her. The abyss between her and all the others, even Chagas himself, remained unchanged. Even with him, the great and almighty, with indignance the Lord admitted. He recalled a fragment from a conversation between Engineer Tail and Fay Rodis. This had been reported to him at the time. Rodis had explained to Tail that one of the very important psychological foundations of creative life is completely absent on the planet Yanyak, the consciousness of the infinity of space, with its unattainable boundaries and innumerable worlds not yet discovered by man. The unfathomable depths of the cosmos exist even outside the knowledge of the Great Circle and in the most unexpected combinations of the laws of the material world. The engineer had replied that Rodis herself was for him the embodiment of this infinity, and that her soul was as different from their psyche as infinity differed from the closed and boring world of Yanyak, the main core of which was in a strict hierarchy. A clever compliment from an engineer, thought the Lord, but there is something else which, of course, the poor fellow does not dare to think about. She is a woman of the same root with all, and therefore must inevitably submit to the will and strength of a man. However, I do not think that this cold, cheerful, and self-assured daughter of the earth will be as good a lover as my Efremov. But still, one has to experience. And, like all the rulers of all times and worlds, the chairman of the Council of the Four began without delay to fulfill his intention. He got up, and Zug and General Shi immediately followed suit. Ervobia remained sitting, crossing her legs and swinging her shoe with a starlit flash embedded in it. The beams of flashes, directed vertically, illuminated the slender legs of the Tormanzian woman, outlining them in full length through the thin fabric of her dress. Fay Rodis, considering the evening over, got up too, thinking about the painting in her room. After her talk with Tail, she felt the wish today to take up brushes and paints. But Choyo Chagas stated that he urgently needed to discuss an important issue with her. Both members of the council, bowing, disappeared, leaving their chairman, it seemed to Rodis, with pleasure. Ervobia stood up, glanced at Choyo Chagas, asking a mute question. She breathed excitedly, showing large bluish teeth in a forced grin. But Choyo Chagas did not seem to notice her call. And then Ervobia went to the exit, without saying goodbye and without looking back, insulted, beautiful, and unkind. Choyo Chagas, for the first time in the presence of Rodis, began to laugh, and she was surprised at how rude his laugh sounded. The Lord pushed aside the middle curtain and led Rodis into a dazzlingly bright corridor, where two guards in green clothes were sitting on benches opposite each other. Ignoring them, Choyo Chagas walked to the door at the end of the corridor and performed some manipulation of the lock. The thick door opened, and Fay Rodis entered the Lord's personal, accessible to no one chamber, hidden in the thick walls of the palace. A giant crystal prism served as a window, reflecting the burning sunset horizon. Choyo Chagas pressed a lever, the prism turned, the gloomy sky of Tormance appeared, and orange lamps automatically lit in the room. A large pentagonal mirror reflected the white and silver Maharani and the nearby ruler in black clothing embroidered with silver snakes. Chagas took a step towards a wide sofa covered by a fleecy carpet with a pattern of woven rings, stopped behind Rodis and looked over her shoulder at the reflection in the mirror. She understood what was about to happen. The game that had started had to be carried through to the end without creating labyrinthine contradictions. Rodis responded to the Lord with an indifferent and condescending look. The large arms of Choyo Chagas enfolded her slender waist. A moment, and Rodis would touch his back and lay her head on his shoulder. Nothing of the kind took place. An incomprehensible force threw his hands off. Instantly, his self-assuredness vanished, and it was as if there never had been any desire. He even recoiled from her, such was his astonishment. "Better to return things to the way they were," Rodis said quietly. Choyo Chagas collapsed onto the sofa, as if half awake, searching for smoking accessories on the table. Fay Rodis calmly, without words, sat sideways on the edge of the sofa. The stunned Choyo Chagas began to smoke. For the first time in years, he had no idea what to do. Pretend nothing had happened, or become angry? Rodis came to his aid. The game was over, and of the Maharani only a white sari remained. Is the lord of the planet as submissive to instincts as the most ignorant of the Sholi? She asked, assimilating the terminology of Yan Yak. Chagas indignantly rejected this suggestion. "Having succumbed to your charm, I did not explain myself, as I should have, but ye yourself are to blame for this." Rodis expressed her silent bewilderment with all her appearance. "Is it really enough for you to meet several times with a woman who is unlike the others in order to catch fire with unrestrained passion?" She asked, falling into the pensive tone that had the strongest effect on Lord. One could understand people who have seen little, standing low in your hierarchical system, constrained by a narrow life. For them, this is perhaps inevitable, but ye, for a moment, the face of the Lord took on a purple hue. However, he immediately mastered himself. "You say so without understanding the true motives. I wanted to be convinced of my attraction to ye before asking ye for one very serious thing. In what ye are convinced? I am convinced." An evil smile for a moment distorted the Lord's face. He erased it with his usual effort of will. "Ye know, for the first time I have to ask, not order, a pity. Such autocracy inevitably spoils people. Is it really the case that in childhood and adolescence ye only gave orders? After all, your power is not hereditary? Unfortunately, no." Memories of the humiliation of childhood and adolescence, although dimmed over the years, sometimes burn like fire, naturally. The complex of resentment and revenge is inevitable for anyone who has made his way to power. But is any request humiliating? Did you not have to make requests of your mother, father, teachers, and mentors? Your first sweetheart? We are deviating. Let's return to my request. The Lord spoke dryly. Ye, with your bottomless intuition and soft sympathy, seemed to me the most brilliant of all women I have seen. I'm not even speaking about knowledge, about psychological power, and, finally, about beauty, which is also very important. I remember the conversation about praise, Rodis laughed. How are you going to humiliate me? Humiliate? Great, Snake. I want to exalt you over the entire planet Yanyach. I want you to give yourself to me. Fay Rodis sat up straight. Choyo Chagas impassionately continued, to give me a son. It is my hope that the earth has learned to govern genetics, and that ye can give birth to a child of a chosen sex? For what do ye need a son from me? 500 million women in Tormance are at your service. They are far behind ye in health, perfection of body and soul. Your son will be the first hereditary lord of the planet Yanyach, or whatever he wishes to call it. Perhaps he will call it by your name. The color of indignation was not noticeable on the dark skin of Rodis. So ye dream of hereditary power? What for? The objective is clear. To improve life on the planet. The achievement of this objective goes through the strengthening of power to its complete absoluteness. The Lord must become immeasurably higher than everyone, the God of the planet and its people. It seems to me that ye have succeeded in this, Rodis said, restraining perturbation. Ye and your companions stand so high above the mass of the population of Yanyach as was possible only in the most ancient states of our earth. Choyo Chagas grimaced and suddenly, confidingly leaning towards his interlocutor, whispered, Understand that I do not have such an all-embracing mind that all my subjects sincerely bow before it. But ye are intelligent enough to understand that. To understand the impossibility for one person to grasp the colossal amount of knowledge that the scientific governance over the planet requires. But ye have scientists, they will help. It is a shame that ye have no trust in them or anyone at all. Yes, yes, I cannot do without them, without these loli, but I do not trust them. Scientists are deceivers, cowards, and worthless servants. For many generations, they deceived the rulers and the people of Yanyach, and, as far as I know, it was the same in the old days on Earth. They promised that the planet could feed an unlimited number of people, but they did not take into account that Earth would be depleted long before the limit they determined. They did not take into account the harm of chemical fertilizers that poisoned plants and soil, did not take into account the need for a certain living space for each person. Not understanding all this, they did not hesitate to come up with categorical conclusions. And as a result, they caused a terrible disaster. 80 years of famine and murder, true, they paid for their mistakes and impudence. Thousands of scientists were hung upside down at the gates of cities or in front of their scientific institutions. Scientists have always deceived us, the lords, and especially mathematicians and physicists, whose real successes no one, besides themselves, could make any sense of. The hierophants and magi of the earth proceeded in such a way. No, I do not like scientists. Small, vainglorious people, spoiled by an easy life, but thinking that they know the secrets of destiny. Fay Rodis, interested by his frankness, smiled thoughtfully. Their whole fault lies in the absence of bilateral thinking, true dialectics. They did not understand that with the immense diversity of the world, mathematical methods are like language. After all, language is also one of the most logical structures of human thought. You can play with words to prove anything you want, and you can pick out mathematical proofs for anything. Scientists of Earth often amuse themselves with such jokes. With impunity, who punishes for a joke? Don't take it seriously, don't be so pettily offended. However, ye yourselves are like mathematicians, issuing decrees and orders and believing that words can change the development of society and the course of history. Who can then? Only the people themselves, so we influence the people, not this way. Any violence necessarily generates a counterforce, which will inexorably develop and manifest itself not immediately, but inevitably, and sometimes from an unexpected side. Do you have examples? There are plenty of them. Take the advancement of people in a rank and title-based society. Such a system automatically and inevitably generates incompetence at all levels of the hierarchy. And that's why I want to strengthen the entire system, starting from its top. I started talking about scientists so that ye would understand how I want to give Yanyach a ruler who is superior in the power of the mind to modern scholars' lackeys. They coax a lot of money out of me, promising high technical achievements. In fact, it turns out that every step along the path of great discoveries is monstrously expensive and becomes more and more unbearable for the planet. It is not for nothing that we banned cosmic flights. Science leads to a dead end, but I cannot destroy it and cannot foresee its mistakes and deceptions. I can only keep my scientist servants and fear that at any moment I will unleash in their direction a pack of Sholi, who will deal with them with such ruthlessness that the memory of this will remain through the centuries. Such a memory has already remained both on Yanyak and on Earth after Chinese pseudo-socialism, Rodis inserted. History repeats itself. Ye have repeated it. But ye understand that this is the mistake of humanity. Why, having once allowed it, would ye want such a repetition? To achieve what the ancestors failed to achieve. And ye dream of a son with an outstanding mind to whom you will entrust the planet? Rodis asked quietly. Precisely so, a noble objective. Ye assure me that ye have come here for the good of my people. Here is an opportunity to really do good. And Choyo Chagas licked his lips in genuine excitement. How naive ye are, Lord of the planet, Fay Rodis suddenly said loudly. What? Rodis held out her hand in a soothing gesture. Forgive my unfair harshness. Ye are unable to egress from the noosphere of Yanya. All prejudices, stereotypes, and conservatism of thinking inherent in humanity reign over the highest man in the state. Visions, thoughts, dreams, ideas, images accumulate in humanity and are invisibly present with us, influencing a series of generations for millennia. Along with the bright images of teachers, creators of beauty, knights of King Arthur or Russian bogatyrs, demons killers, satanic women and sadists were created by dark fantasy. Existing in the form of fixed cliches, thought forms in the noosphere, they could create not only hallucinations, but also generate real results, influencing the behavior of people through the psyche. Clearing the noosphere of lies, sadism, manic and evil ideas cost enormous efforts to the humanity of Earth. Here, on your planet, I physically feel the prickly noosphere of rudeness and anger. The scientists, whom ye dislike so much, are probably to blame. Trying to replace man with machine, they fell into a dangerous error and spread in the noosphere one-sided linear logical thinking, taken as the essence of reason. So be it, then the more necessary is the Superman. No, the human brain physically changes slowly. The duration of even our earthly civilization is negligible, and therefore it has not made significant changes to it. Any development is entirely determined by circumstances. The surrounding environment? Not only. Millions of capable people died, not giving the world what they could, only because there was no correspondence of their abilities with the tasks of society and the level of the time. That is why I cannot imagine my son in the role of a lord at such a low level of consciousness. What do you mean, low? Yes, Chairman, the desire to lord, to rise above others, to command people, is one of the most primitive instincts, most pronounced among male baboons. Emotionally, this is the lowest and darkest level of senses. You want to say? And I will add that if you really had a son, the future hereditary lord, with more than outstanding intelligence, it would certainly bring trouble. By the law of the arrow of Ahriman, what is this arrow? This is what we conditionally call the tendency of a poorly organized society with a morally weighty noosphere to multiply evil and grief. Every action, even outwardly humane, turns into a disaster for individuals, entire groups, and all of humanity. An idea proclaiming the good has the tendency, to the measure of its execution, to carry with it more and more bad, to become harmful. A society of the lower capitalist type cannot do without lies. Purpose-oriented lies also create their own demons, distorting everything, the past, or rather the idea of it, the present in actions, and the future in the results of these actions. Lies are the main calamity that corrodes humanity, honest aspirations and bright dreams. I see that nothing has been done here to create protective systems against lies and slander, and without this, the morality of society will steadily fall, creating the basis for usurpation of power, tyranny, or fanatical and maniacal leadership. Our common ancestors also discovered the law of unfavorable coincidences, or Finnegan's Law, as they half-jokingly called the serious tendency of all processes in society to transform into failure, error, destruction, from the point of view of a person. Of course, this is only a partial reflection of the great law of averaging, according to which low or high structures are rejected by the process. Man, on the other hand, is constantly trying to achieve an increase in structures without creating a basis for this, striving to obtain something for nothing. The development of living nature is built on the blind game of trial and error. In the development of its structures, nature has already played trillions of throws of dice, and man is proud of the very first attempts, as of a wise experiment. In fact, a great many of them are needed in order to catch up with the complexity of nature and penetrate into the issues already solved by it. Human society is the creation of people, not of nature, therefore there were no millions of trials, and Finnegan's law for social structures turns into Ahriman's arrow with a directed tendency towards the destruction of small numbers, that is, perfection. In nature, this is overcome by selection over an enormous length of time, because nature copes with this, creating in organisms manifoldly repeating protective devices and margins of safety. The transformation of Finnegan's law into the arrow in human society becomes a disaster because it strikes precisely at the highest manifestations of a person who strives to ascend, at those who propel progress. I mean genuine progress, that is, the ascent from inferno. And how do ye overcome the arrow? With the most thorough deliberation and advanced premediation of each matter, protection from games of blind trial. One has to start by upbringing, selecting people, saving, and building systems of security. Choyo Chagas shook his head. Impossible. Too far has the degeneration of the Yanyak descended. The damage to the gene pool has resulted in physical weakness and spiritual conformism. In our conditions, a rapid turnover of generations is necessary. Ye said yourself, the more often ye throw the dice, the more surely ye win. Nature does not reckon with victims in the achievement of an objective. A wise man could not proceed in such a way. Fay Rodis, seeing the futility of the conversation, stood up. So ye refuse? A threat sounded in the question of Chagas. Of course. If this could change the destiny of mankind on Yanyak, I would always be ready to give my child to it, no matter how difficult it is for a mother to leave her child in a strange and distant world. But give birth to a future lord, an oppressor, and an unhappy person. Never! Choyo Chagas rose slowly, as if wondering what to do next. Goodbye, Chairman, said Rodis, reading his mind once again. I am always ready to tell ye about the comparison of our two planets, to advise, to show any films. While my friends are in the city, while I am here, ye see, ye could not even do without hostages. Judge for yourself the level of your state. And now ye should not continue what is not needed. Choyo Chagas leaned back on the sofa and started puffing smoke from his pipe. Rodis turned her back on him and went to the door. It took her only 2 minutes to solve the secret of the lock. The door flew open, and Rodis headed down the hallway into the green room. Neither of the guards moved, looking through her as if into emptiness. Chagas from his gloomy abode looked at her. He physically felt Rodis's gait. In the shining white sari, through the folds of which her body was clearly outlined, Fay Rodis seemed to him unattainable, and he himself he saw as humiliatingly laughable. Beside himself, Choyo Chagas rushed into the corridor. The guards jumped up, widening frightened eyes, which further angered the lord. He began to slap the guards on the cheeks until the pain in his hands had sobered him. Having mastered himself, he entered the green office, now forever connected with the image of the mistress of the earth, and, propping his head in his hands, he sat down at the table. He felt that hopeless emptiness around him, which inevitably forms when decent people, who always disagree with unjustness, are removed from the environment. Inexorably, the process of replacing them with non-entities and ignoramuses, ready to praise any actions of the Lord, goes on. The advisors, the guards, all this is human rubbish. Their loyalty is ensured only by handouts and privileges. There are no friends, there is no soul support in anyone. More and more often, fear of a possible conspiracy rises. From time to time, the comb of terror raked the masses of lowly dignitaries, serpent-bearers, scientists in eyes of the Lord, leaving indelible horror. Fear of responsibility deprived people of initiative. The fear of any risk and the search for excuses for all occasions were almost the main activity and the work of these people. They had become useless human material, like survivors of a catastrophe, who could no longer strive with any difficulties, since the previous tribulations had paralyzed their brains and their will. Choyo Chagas hated his surroundings, but could not find a way out of the impasse into which the continuation of the old policy of wise denial had led him. Choyo Chagas hit the table with the edge of his hand. And why look for a way out at all? The people who had come from the distant ancestral home had brought confusion with them. Earth is infinitely distant in space and time, in essence unattainable. Soon the starship would be heading homeward, everything would remain the same. Let them waste their time and soon be gone. Today he had dreamed like a brainless Sholi, and not for the first time. Beauty, no, something incomprehensible in this which breaks his will. Enough. Just think, a hostage, as soon as I press the call button. No, the diabolical starship sits on the sea cape, and another one has been called for help. To send her to the city, hardly reasonable. With her sharpest of minds and satanic seduction, she will cause a fermentation of minds. I will order Tael to take her to the vault of history. Let her rummage through the mountains of documents while her assistants spend their time in the city. The vault is located in an old temple, surrounded by a garden and a wall, and the eyes of the Lord, along with Tael, will make sure that she does not leave the designated place. Tael, what if he also falls under the power of this one? Nonsense, he is too pathetic to imagine himself a friend of Rodis. However, let us keep eyes on both. Something has already startled her. Maybe Tael? Her announcing her rejection of film showings means that the Earthlings have begun to understand who here is the owner. Choyo Chagas reached out to the cabinet, fumbled for the secret spring, and pulled from a popped-out box a ball of an odorous black substance. He put it in his mouth and, chewing slowly, stared into the depths of the crystal ball. At this time, Fay Rodis, frowning with displeasure, looked at herself in the mirror. She felt the presence of the spies. This constant surveillance had begun to annoy her. She activated the shielding, stroking her black SDP as the sole close and loyal creature. Enough play! The outfit of the Maharani was put away under the dome of the non-apet. Fay Rodis doused herself with an ion shower, shaking off the feeling of being dirty. She again put on a comfortable dress with a short, wide skirt and with relief climbed up onto the scaffolding. Taking up a brush, for several minutes she considered the figure of the woman, and remained extremely dissatisfied with her work. The call signal sounded from the dark flame. "Are you tired, Rodis?" Griff Rift asked. "No. Simply dissatisfied with myself. Nothing is working out for me. I poorly understand this life, and make mistake after mistake." "Oh no, nothing serious," she reassured, noticing the alarm on the faces of her friends. "And with us, everything is great," said Oladez. "An hour ago, we took our first swim in the Sea of Tormance. And imagine, we all experienced a strange feeling of dissatisfaction. I don't understand why." "And I finally got it," said Nayahali. "Here the composition of salts and their concentration is different than on Earth." "Then the Tormancians do not get joy from the sea," said Fay Rodis. "After all, their blood, like ours, inherited the composition of the water of the world ocean of the Earth. They carry the earthly sea in their blood, and, probably, a longing for it." The short meeting came to an end. Rodis, unable to achieve the usual inner calm, again took up the painting, sketching the figure of a strong, knowledgeable woman, symbolizing measure. The woman bent down to the people with an outstretched arm, ready to pull up to the top the first who would reach out to her. Her face had the same assurance in the ultimate victory as that of Tael. Recently, having seen the new variant, Tael told Rodis that measure had become similar to her. Rodis worked almost all night, not knowing how soon she would have to leave the gardens of Zoam.